automated podcast.
Welcome to Automated. I'm your host, Mark Verbenkov, and in this weekly podcast, we will be exploring the impact of emerging technology on jobs, society, as well as us, with business and technology leaders, researchers, and independent professionals across the world. So if you've been listening to a couple episodes in the past, I typically like to jump right into the episodes and mostly avoid any kind of preamble. As this is also some of the feedback that I've been given from some of you listening. But today's episode topic was actually requested by a listener. So I just wanted to mention that if there is an interesting technology that you are aware of and think it would have kind of a significant impact on society or jobs, please let me know and I'd be happy to dedicate a podcast to it, either as one of these solo monologue type episodes or with a relevant guest that I can find and bring on. But even without a kind of direct request, I still think that I'll be continuing to cover some of these occasional big news items that are relevant for the themes of the podcast, because I find these usually quite interesting, and I've heard the same thing from some of you listening. So with that out of the way, let's jump into today's episode. So over the last few months, you may have read an article or a social media post about a well-known person like Jack Dorsey, Grimes, John Cleese, Mark Cuban, Paris Hilton, and many others who have joined the NFT frenzy. And NFT stands for Non-fungible Tokens, if you haven't heard that before. So they have been offering videos, signed tweets, drawings, and even releasing an NFT art gallery, bringing dollars and, more importantly, attention to this technology as NFTs enter mainstream awareness. So what exactly are NFTs? So we can break this down into two main parts. Firstly, non-fungible. And this means simply something that is unique and cannot be traded or replaced equally for something else. This really means that the object is kind of ensured to be unchanged and secured forever. So this can be a single unique item or multiple unique items which belong to a kind of set. If this is at all confusing, I think that the best and perhaps most relevant example are trading sports cards. So they are non-fungible. You can decide to trade one player for another, but you clearly own something different once that trade has happened. This is not the case, say, for a $1 bill, where both people doing the trade end up with arguably the exact same thing. Now I say arguably because one might have a small rip or a stain on it, but when that dollar is in a digital form, that traded dollar is completely fungible. So this leads us to the second part of the non-fungible tokens, and that is the token aspect. So NFTs predominantly exist on the Ethereum blockchain. This is the second largest cryptocurrency, which apart from supporting the native Ethereum token, also supports other tokens on which additional information can be stored. This usually comes in the form of other platforms where apps can be built on. But I think that this is a little bit outside of the scope of today's episode. So I'll just finally say that all NFTs are not just limited to the Ethereum blockchain. There are other blockchains that already host other NFTs. So the reason that blockchain is actually used as the host or the platform for these is because of the tracking nature of blockchains. So digital data, most specifically transactions, on a blockchain are stored and kept as permanent records available for all of those to see publicly and verify, which really lends itself perfectly to secure and unique and secured digital information like NFTs. So overall, in short, an NFT is an untampered and tamper-proof certificate of authenticity and ownership. So to make this a little bit more tangible, we can look at some of the examples of NFTs. So currently the main field of application of these tokens is actually in the gaming industry, where gamers purchase unique weapons and other kind of digital assets like body armor or other types of suits to improve their gaming experience, usually just aesthetically. But with the growing interest in this technology, the uses are actually growing. So there is a website called non-fungible.com, and here they have a distribution of the NFTs. So 41% is the gaming industry, 29% are collectibles, 13% is real estate, 7% are collectible card games, 6% domain names, and 4% art. So even though art makes up a very small percentage of the total NFT market, there is significant public interest in this asset class. And this might also have something to do with the price tag attached to some of them. So if you're listening to this episode on the website, you'll see that there is a cover art for the specific episode, and this comes from the Dragon, which is the most expensive NFT crypto kitty that was part of a popular NFT, Pokemon-like game that actually nearly shut down the Ethereum blockchain in late 2017. So Dragon sold for 600 Ethereum tokens, worth roughly $1.3 million today. However, this pales in comparison to the latest NFT craze, where we are seeing multi-million dollar sales for individual NFTs. So a good example of this is Jack Dorsey's first tweet, which he bundled and sold as an NFT, and this alone went for over 1,600 Ethereum, or about $3 million. So apart from the monetary craze that this digital asset class is creating, I really kind of wanted to spend this episode to look at the actual value of NFTs, and then we'll also end on what the future implications of this will be. So the first thing that really came to my mind when I heard about these back in early 2018 might be the same thing that you are thinking about if you are just coming across NFTs for the first time, and that is really the creation of scarce digital goods. So though a relatively simple idea, it might actually sound at first to be a bit of an oxymoron. When you picture digital goods, I think that usually the most common characteristics are abundance and replicability. So think of an ebook as a very typical digital good and compare this to a real paperback book. Though the words are the exact same in each case, the digital copy can of course be copied and shared an almost unlimited number of times with practically zero marginal cost for each additional ebook. This has actually been one of the kind of underlying tenets that has allowed for massive growth in digital business over the last 20 years. But as interactions and transactions have become dominated by this digital medium, it has also put stress on traditional forms of work and businesses. So it is much easier and costs much less to set up an online store with drop shipping compared to a brick and mortar one today. The same can also be said for almost all aspects of our civilization as digitalization becomes more ubiquitous with each passing year. And this can also be irrespective of the forced push due to COVID, of course. So therefore, the growing expectation of digital transactions stresses traditional or classic work. It is perhaps no surprise then that art has become the center of attention for NFTs, as platforms like Instagram have also pushed artists further and further towards digital collaboration, marketing, and selling. The notion of art ownership has been diluted somewhat. So NFTs offer a very real possible solution. By creating a unique and scarce digital piece of art, the unlimited replication of art pieces is finally reversed, bringing back traditional ownership models in our new digital environment. But this possible benefit isn't without controversy. So bit rot, where image quality deteriorates with time, the contribution towards global warming by simply using blockchains, or whether the ownership of an NFT is fundamentally worth anything, all kind of swirl around the discussion of NFTs. But what has really interested me more is their possible future impact. So as already mentioned, currently the focus of NFTs is on high-profile artwork and collectibles like Jack Dorsey's tweet. So this is expected as both an understanding of what NFTs actually are and what their uses are explored by the market itself. But apart from being able to support artists, I think a powerful utility can be seen in real estate. So like many traditional markets, transferring property ownership is both time-consuming and very labor-intensive, not to mention expensive. So real estate also lends itself perfectly to these NFTs. It is stationary, non-fungible, and easily verified by independent parties. This is not to mention in most parts of the world, real estate is already highly identified, detailed, and registered in many different domains. Therefore, by tokenizing the property rights, the labor-intensive transfer can become significantly easier, faster, and less expensive. So we really could see an entire industry possibly collapse overnight if this were to take place. So put simply, the intermediary would dissolve, enabling both the buyer and the seller to interact in a more direct, yet also more trusting interaction, which is, by the way, one of the main arguments for blockchain as a whole. So as a side note, if this were to happen, this would also free up a further opportunity for borrowing against your house or apartment with relative ease, or even possibly divide the real estate that you own to be sold in a kind of a timeshare model. So there are several opportunities on the table here, and kind of the second order effects are numerous. But as this is already fitting in kind of the area of speculation, I think it's best to just note that these possibilities exist for now and maybe take them up at some point in the future, potentially with a guest coming onto the podcast. So real estate is, however, a relatively easy asset class where this can happen, as I mentioned before. But it isn't impossible to see that this could occur for other goods like vehicles, IP rights, licensing and insurance, appraisals, and as I read for the research into this episode, some have even had the far out prediction that ideas like representing living things, like endangered species, or even perhaps humans, could also be incorporated into NFTs. But this is really beyond what we can say and know for sure right now. As the NFT market continues to grow and gain interest, I'm sure we'll be seeing other applications quickly be onboarded in the years ahead. And I think that this is especially true as we continue to see a blurring of the digital and the real worlds. And so who knows, perhaps in the next few years, even this podcast or specific episodes could be bought as exclusive NFTs. So needless to say, I think that this technology is really interesting, and I hope that this relatively quick episode gave you a little bit more of a look as to what could happen with NFTs beyond just kind of the more sensationalized views of the expensive art or the collectibles that are being sold right now. Even though I think it's important for most technologies to get some sort of hype surrounding them, I think that the part that is really interesting is what kind of social implications or even implications regarding different kind of businesses or sectors or industries that these technologies can bring about. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast and the conversations here, the best way to do this is to go onto Apple Podcasts and leave a review, as it helps the algorithm to reach out to new listeners and brings the show to them. Also, feel free to check out the website, automatedpodcast.org, where you can find the show notes for each episode, written articles on the themes of the podcast, and a library of resources on the topic of emerging tech and automation. Also, if you want to reach out and leave any feedback or you have any questions about the podcast or any of the conversations, there are general contact links such as email, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. for you there on the website. And finally, for those of you that want more than just an audio conversation, the video recordings are now going to be up on YouTube for the newer conversations, so feel free to check out the videos by searching for Automated Podcast on YouTube, where of course you can like and subscribe if you prefer to support the podcast that way.
The Automated Podcast.